Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Plan B Success. Today, we have a very special guest who I'm so excited to have, Tom Ziglar, the son of the legendary Zig Ziglar. Who doesn't know Zig Ziglar? And if for the millennials, if you don't know, you better go and pick a book up and read about him. I wouldn't be amiss to say that he was the father of motivational speaking. And he's had a very rich life, 86 years till his last breath. He was out there speaking and motivating people. He published about 30 plus books, which are all stellar, and he went through his own ups and downs. One of his books, and for that matter, we'll hear more from Tom about his other books, but I know for a fact that one of his books went to about 39 different publishers before it got out there in front of the world and sold millions of copies. He himself has influenced over 250 million people throughout his life. And today we're going to hear from Zig Ziglar, directly from Tom Ziglar. Tom, welcome aboard.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So who else or who better to talk about Zig Ziglar than you? So why don't you, in your own words, help us know who Zig Ziglar was? I know the world has a certain idea about him, but it would be great to hear from you.
You bet. Well, most people recognize Zig Ziglar as maybe one of the best speakers who ever walked the stage. He was mesmerizing. He had a 30-year stretch where he spoke 25 to 35 times a year to crowds averaging over 12,000 in size. I mean, that is pretty impressive. The biggest event he spoke to was at the Georgia Dome. They had over 80,000 people there. So that is just an amazing legacy in and of itself. And then he wrote, now it's like 45 books. And here's an amazing thing is they've transcribed some of the speeches that he did, some of the audio programs that he did, and they've released books since he's passed away. He passed away November 28th, 2012. So in the last 7 years, there's been another 10 books come out, which once again just kind of speaks to his legacy. But I tell people this: as good as Dad was on stage or in writing, he was better. He was even better at home. Great speaker, great author, but he was a better dad. He was a better husband. He's one of the few people in our industry that when you look, we call it balanced success: mental, spiritual, physical, family, financial, personal, and career. He was a 10 out of 10 on just about all of those on a regular basis. Not that he didn't have challenges, not that he didn't have setbacks, but he really lived a life of integrity. And for those who met him, they would tell you that there's never been a more kind or humble person as well. And I think that's the key. A lot of times when people have that level of success, the pride usually catches up and gets them, right? They start believing the press clippings, and it gets them in trouble. Dad was always careful to say, hey, I'm blessed, and the reason you know about me is because of a lot of other people in my faith. So
that's pretty awesome. For someone who's had that level of success to be a 10 out of 10 on everything, that's pretty awesome. So, when I look back at his life, he's had a rich 86 years, and he was the 10th child of 12 kids. And one of the things that I'd read about him was that he started working pretty early in life. And then he lost his dad when he was about 5, then his sister a couple of months later. So he's had his own set of trials and tribulations. And then he got working very soon in his life. And his work life wasn't even a smooth path. So what do you think triggered him getting onto the stage and speaking?
Yeah. So just to kind of give everybody a quick recap, his dad died when he was 5, and his mom only had a 5th grade education. So he's the 10th of 12 kids, grew up in Yazoo City, Mississippi. This was in the heart of the Great Depression. And later in Dad's life, he never really said this much, but he said, our family was considered the second poorest family in that town. And it was a little town in one of the poorest states. And there they were. He started work when he was 6 years old selling peanuts on the corner, and then he worked in the grocery store because he had to. He goes off in school. He doesn't do well. He goes into the Navy at the end of World War II, gets out of the Navy. He gets a sales job. And for 2.5 years, he didn't sell anything. Well, he did. He sold his car. He sold his furniture, just to survive. And then a man named P.C. Merrill, who Dad respected. P.C. Merrill was a leader in the organization, somebody that everybody looked up to, came to Dad, looked him in the eye and said, Zig, in all my years, I've never seen such a waste. But if you believed in yourself and went to work on a regular schedule, you could be a champion. And that was the first time that anybody of authority who Dad respected told him that he could be a champion. And so that personal belief from someone else, I mean, this is really, this because you're a coach. This is what coaches do is they see the potential that somebody has already within them, and they draw it out and they transfer confidence to that person. So that's what happened to Dad. So immediately he went to work trying to figure out, what does it mean to believe in myself? And he started going to work on a regular basis. That was direct sales. So he would knock on the door every day on, in residential sales, knocking on the door at 9 a.m. At the end of the year, he finished number 2 out of 7,000 people.
Wow.
And in the previous 2 years, he'd never been in the top 5,000. And so the only thing that changed, he didn't know the product better. He didn't know the demonstration better. He didn't know, relationship skills any better. The only thing that changed was his belief in himself. Instead of thinking, they'll never buy from me, or why would they want to talk to me? He began to think, they've got a problem. I've got a solution. Of course they're going to open the door. And out of that, his career blossomed, because when you become number 2 out of 7,000 salespeople, what does management want? Management wants you to start training their people, right? So the door opened for him to do sales training. And this is an interesting story, because when he first started doing sales training, it was all about closing skills, sales techniques, building rapport, getting referrals, all the things that are classically taught in sales. And the more he did it, the more he realized that that's not where the problem is. The challenge is the same thing that he had, which is people didn't have the foundational belief in themselves that allowed them to perform at their capability. And so as he grew and as he gained years of experience, his presentations, his speaking transitioned from technical sales to interpersonal success and motivation and discipline and character and hard work and integrity and the things that really matter. And that's how he got started and ended up who he became.
One of the things he worked on initially in his career when he was training salespeople was to ensure that they were respected. That's something that I had read about. How did he think about salespeople throughout his career? And then how did that start attracting others?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you how big of a deal it was. He believed that sales was the greatest profession of all. And when you think about it, I love studying words and things like that. In the Hebrew language, there's 2 words for the word sale. And one of them has deep moral value. I mean, it's a very deep word. It's a very moral word. It has a lot of implications. And what it really means is that a salesperson, when they're in the process of selling, they're actually looking into the future of the prospect's life, anticipating a problem they might have, and then helping them solve the problem before it ever happens. Now, that's a pretty high moral calling when you think about it. I mean, is there any better service to man that we could do than to help them to avoid a problem that could hurt them in their business or their personal life or in their family life? I mean, that's what a great salesperson does. And so he approached it that way, and he believed in it so much. And this is kind of funny. I was born on February 1st, 1965 in Columbia, South Carolina. And on February 2nd, 1965, there was a newspaper announcement in the Columbia newspaper that said John Thomas Ziglar, a salesman, was born February 1st, 1965. And so I tease people and I say, have you ever met a born salesman? And they'll say no. And I say, well, you have now. And that's how convicted and how proud Dad was of being in the sales profession. Now, here's the reality. The reality is you can be proud of it when you do it with complete integrity and you have a product or service that solves a problem that benefits that individual or that organization for the long term. When that's what you're offering, why wouldn't you be proud of that? And just that one shift of, wait a second, I'm a salesperson and salespeople, they're shifty and you can't trust them. If your whole mindset is that, no wonder nobody wants to talk to you, right? But if your mindset is, hey, I can solve a problem that's going to prevent you from having pain in the future, just let's see if it's a fit. When that's the mindset, then the doors open wide.
One thing with Zig was there was immense positivity in him. And when I look back at his career, a major portion of his career was even before internet was born. He was at a time when it was not easy to publish books. It was not easy to corral people into crowds and speak to them, talk to them. But he did all that, and then he caught on like wildfire. What do you attribute all of that to?
I call it the Zig Ziglar secret influence formula. And I'll share it with you. And the reason I call it secret is because I don't even think Dad knew he was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm kind of a nerd. I'm kind of an intellectual engineer. I like to figure out why things work the way they do. And so I always wondered, and I'm sure you've had this. You hear a great speaker, you take notes, you're excited, you leave, and then 6 months later, you see those notes that you took, and you read them, and you're like, oh, I should have done that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just because you inspire somebody doesn't mean their life is about to change. But yet, Zig Ziglar spoke, and people, they did what he said, and their life was changed. So if I'm going to influence somebody in a positive way that's going to impact them, what's the secret formula? So here it is. This is what I learned from Dad when I broke it down. Hope, identity, will, skill, and refill. So every audience that he spoke to on all of his audio programs, in his book, he created hope for the listener. And the hope was this. He would ask this simple question: is there anything you can do in the next week that would make your family life, your business life, or your personal life worse? Can I see your hands? And of course, everybody would laugh because Zig Ziglar, that's a crazy question to ask. Then he would flip it and he would say, how many of you believe there's something you can do in your personal, family, or business life for the next week that would make things better? And of course, all the hands would go up. And then he would tie it down and he would say this: whether you realize it or not, you have told yourself in your own mind that you have the power to make things better or worse, and the choice is yours. And that is a fundamental truth. When people believe they have the power to make things better, then they take action. If they don't think they can impact anything, they're hopeless, they don't take action. So he always started with hope. The second is what I call identity. And I already told Dad's story. So people would, when Dad would speak for more than 45 minutes, he would tell his story about growing up poor and not doing well in school and struggling. And everybody in the room would think, wow, golly, I always thought Zig Ziglar was just born that way. I guess if he can do it, maybe I can.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of studies on identity. So when I identify with you, then I am more likely to try what you tell me to do. And when I do try it, I will try it 30% longer. There's a book called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle that talks about a study where they took a group of college kids who were learning algebra and they taught them a branch of algebra in the classroom. And at the end of the class, they handed out a test. And the test had 10 questions for them to solve. And in the middle of the test was a little bio of John Edwards, who had founded that branch of algebra. And for half the class, they put John Edwards' birthday, and they made it match the student's birthday who got it. The other half of the class, the birthday was random. The class, they filmed it. The class students whose birthday was the same as that was on the sheet of paper, they worked on the problems 30% longer.
Hmm.
And so this is what I believe. If you want to have influence in your business, in your career, as a speaker, as a manager, as a leader, when you share your stories of when it didn't go so well and how you overcame it, the hard road that you've had, then people identify with that. And then when you give them some advice, I think what happens is they try it 30% longer, which is just long enough to get a result. So that's number 2. So hope, identity, and then will, skill, and refill. And so what does that mean? Dad believed, and I believe 100%, that we've got to work on our will, which is our desire, our heart, our attitude, our want to. We got to work on that every day. We got to put the right input in. We got to read the right things. We got to associate with the right people. We got to make an intentional effort. And then we got to work on the skill every day too. Skill is the how-to. It's the process. It's the technique. And so the right attitude plus the right skill, and you combine the effort in there, you're going to get results. Refill simply means we do that on a daily basis. We can never skip a day on those 2 things. And that's how you have an influence. That's how you make a difference in the lives of others.
That's pretty awesome. What was his take on, the advent of technology and the changes that it brought about in terms of reach?
Yeah. I remember when I was an early adopter of Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dad and I were talking, and I was like, I had 100,000 Twitter followers. And this was right after it launched. And because they love Zig Ziglar quotes,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, so everybody wanted to follow that. And I remember talking to Dad. I said, hey, look, I can click a button and this will go out and 1,000 people will see it. And so he would just be in awe on that. And what he told me was interesting. He said, we can reach a global market with the press of a button that I never had access to. Dad used to. He would travel to Asia and Australia and Europe, every other year, every 3 years, and he would do his programs there. And that was it. That's the only time they got to see him. Now, at Ziglar headquarters, I'll do 2 or 3 webinars a week, and probably 20%, maybe 30% of the attendees are from different continents. Not just North America. I'm talking different, different continents that are on there. And so he saw it as a blessing, a way to reach others. It's interesting. A lot of people resist change. Dad's question was, how can this help me reach more people? So anytime something was innovated or something changed in the culture or technology, it was always, how can I use this to reach more people?
When you look back your younger years, what are your impressions of him? I'm sure he was very busy. He was moving around a lot. But when you reflect on that, what were your impressions of him?
That's really an insightful question, because I'll just break my life into 3 components. Okay, the younger years when I wasn't involved in the business, it was like everywhere we went, he was kind of a rock star, and I didn't really know what was going on. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by rock star, it wasn't that people were falling all over themselves to get. It was just that they would recognize him in the hotel, in the elevator, wherever we went. And I thought, well, this is pretty neat, but I didn't really understand what Dad did. When I started working at the business, then I got the firsthand view of, Dad said, he used to tell me, he said, son, we're not in the book and tape business. We're in the life-changing business. Mm-hmm. And so I saw that. So every day almost somebody would come to me and say, hey, I heard your dad speak. I read a book. I went to a program. It changed my life. And when they say change my life, they could say all the way from, yeah, I read his book and I lost 100 pounds, or I read his book and my company was break even and now it's making a big profit, or I read his book and my marriage is intact. I mean, it was like everybody had a different thing that had changed. Then when dad passed away, I heard something a little different, and it was kind of the why. And here was the theme that I heard hundreds of times. People would say this, gosh, your dad changed my life. I'm a big fan. I went to hear him speak, and everything he said was so true. And I waited in line to get his autograph for 2 hours. And then when I spoke to him, even though it was only for a minute, it felt like I was the only person in the room. And I think that's the lesson for all of us. Probably, and I know this is true, none of us can be Zig Ziglar on stage, but we can all be Zig Ziglar one-on-one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I think that's the realization is, who are we one-on-one with the people that God puts in front of us? That's where we can have the impact. And that was really why dad, how many people have a 40 plus year career at the top without any missteps, without any mistakes, without any scandals? And I think it really comes down to that one-on-one intention, every single conversation. How can I help this person? What do they need?
I just wanted to share a few things that are top of mind for me when I look back at Zig Ziglar. One of them is, obviously I followed his speeches, his books, his sayings throughout my younger years. And I really loved his Southern drawl. Every time he spoke on the stage, it was like music, the highs and the lows and the way he spoke to everybody out there. Then the other thing was, at a point in time, I was actually following your blog when he was not doing so well, when he fell off the stairs, and then short-term memory loss, and then the operations that he had, and you guys were contemplating whether to go through it or not. So I kind of, traversed that journey along with you on your blog. And then the other thing I remember is that he did not stop until 2010, I believe, right? 2 years before he died.
Yeah, at the end of 2010, not even 2 years before. Yeah.
He was going on and on till the last minute.
And here's a perspective on that. For those of you who are hearing this for the first time, 4 years earlier, he'd fallen down the stairs and had a double brain bleed, and he lost his short-term memory. He still knew the answers. He just couldn't remember what he just said. And so after that point, my sister Julie primarily, he did over 100 events where they would go to these big events, 10, 20,000 people in the room, and she would interview him and keep him on track. And she would let the room know, hey, the reason I'm here is dad had this injury and his short-term memory is really short. And so he may repeat himself, but that's no big deal. And so immediately what happened was people in the room would lean forward, because for whatever reason in our culture, when somebody has that type of injury or a dementia or Alzheimer's, they tend to isolate. They tend to stay at home. They tend to have embarrassment or shame. And dad was like, wait a second. This wasn't a choice. This is an accident. And I can encourage people who are going through similar struggles. And so dad was never afraid to live. And so we put him on, we helped him get on the stage, so to speak. And the lives that he impacted were so many we couldn't even count because of that. Well, then towards the end, that developed into Alzheimer's. And of course, that's a whole nother game. But still, the more he was around people, the more life he had in him. And so it really became, we got a letter from a lady. This is great. She had epilepsy, and she'd been a trainer and a speaker. And then her epilepsy started, and she'd quit training because she was afraid she was going to have a seizure while she was training. And so she saw Dad, and she wrote us a letter, and she said, "Hey, I've started training again, and I've just written instructions to my host. Hey, if I have a seizure, this is what you do. No worries, I'll be fine in 15 minutes." And so here's the thing. How many of us are using an excuse not to do something, when the reality is that when we do it anyway, we're actually giving more hope and more encouragement to those that we're in front of than if we were completely healthy and had no issues.
You know, when I look at this, right, you kind of became the torchbearer of his legacy as you take the organization forward. So what are your other siblings doing? Are they all in the business, or are they doing different things?
So I have two sisters. Cindy works in the business. And so, in our business, we do a number of things. We have a certification program where we certify people to teach and train our material. We do coaching. We work with small business owners, help them systemize. We have all the CDs and books and programs that people can buy on an individual basis. And so what Cindy does is when people call in with a question or, hey, can I have some help? She talks to them. So it's very much a family business. My other sister, Julie, the one who traveled with Dad, she's taking care of grandbabies, and she also travels as a speaker. She speaks for pregnancy resource centers and those kind of things. She also edited over 30 of Dad's books. So we've always been blessed to have kind of a family affair. My oldest sister, Susie, who passed away about 25 years ago, when she was at the company, she worked on Dad's books as an editor as well.
Awesome. So thank you so much for doing this, Tom. This has been great talking about Zig Ziglar. What would be one thing that you would want to leave away with the listeners in terms of your dad?
Yeah. Dad's probably his most quotable quote is, "You can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want." And that was his philosophy. Somebody once asked me, they said, if you could boil it down to one reason for your dad's success, what would it be? And so here it is. Every day for over 40 years, he would spend the first 2 or 3 hours of the day reading and researching and studying books and audio programs, truth and wisdom, God's word, the Bible, for the sole purpose of internalizing something new, simplifying it to share with someone else for their benefit. Now, there's a proverb that says, "He who waters the garden, will they themselves be watered?" And so if you wanted to take one thing from Zig Ziglar, what if you just spent 5 or 10 minutes a day, first thing in the morning, learning something new? You internalize it, you simplify it, put it in your own words, and then you share it with someone else for their benefit. If you did that every day for a year, how different would your life be? And that is, to me, that's just such a powerful thing. And when you look at it, you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. That, I believe, is how Zig Ziglar became who he was, is that simple daily habit. And you don't have to do 2 or 3 hours a day, because this was his career. But 10 minutes a day, and you learn something for somebody else's benefit, it'll change your life.
That's pretty awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. It's been a pleasure talking about your dad with you, the son. Not everybody gets a
I
chance.
always love talking about Dad, so thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you.